There's about 600 people at the moment because there's a lot of kids around. It is a good place here, and a lot of people, this is where their heart is.
80 kilometres southeast of Alice Springs, the former mission of Santa Theresa is one of the 73 communities that was targeted by the federal intervention. Residents were wary, but welcomed the promise of better services, especially housing.
When it happened, they thought that everything was going to change, but it didn't.
Along with the intervention, the Territory and federal governments launched the Strategic Indigenous Housing and Infrastructure Program, or SIHIP. It's the most expensive Indigenous housing program the government's ever run.
We're going to see 750 new homes built, 230 new houses to replace other houses which will be demolished. Very importantly, 2,500 housing upgrades.
My grandson's bed, my husband and mine. It's really crowded. My daughter comes too with her little nephews and stay here.
Even though Santa Theresa is overcrowded, it did not qualify for new housing, but it did get upgrades to 65 homes.
They only just basically fixed up the bench, painted the walls, fixed up the taps, doorknobs and windows. That's about it.
Chris Wallace is pleased with parts of the work, but since his house has been renovated, he says the Northern Territory government is now charging more rent, and in some ways he feels worse off.
They took out the tiles out of my toilet and they haven't put it back, and it's really hard to mop the floors and keep it clean. So at $75,000 worth is just down the drain.
They didn't do their job properly when they were refurbishing the houses.
When SIHIP began, the federal and territory governments were spending an average of $150,000 per house on refurbishments. But after the budget blew out, they halved that amount to $75,000. The focus now is on making houses safe and livable. But there are questions about whether the refurbished houses even meet these minimum standards.
The houses that I inspected, I would say it definitely wasn't well served, as the houses that I looked at simply don't function.
With 3 decades' experience in the Indigenous housing sector, Paul Folleris helped write the health and safety guidelines for Indigenous housing now being used in SIHIP. During a brief visit to Santa Theresa, he checked some of the homes for residents.
The 2 houses we looked at, in 7 of the 10 critical categories, those houses failed the tests.
The cost of the work that was done inside the houses varied between $20,000 and $100,000. Clearly the focus there was to make the houses, many of which were in very poor condition, functional and safe.
But even the contractors who delivered the refurbishments are worried the program failed to meet the community's needs.
The renovations on Santa Theresa almost look like they're only halfway done. Could these ones be pop riveted on?
Scott McConnell from the Indigenous-owned construction company Ingerica in Alice Springs says Santa Theresa is better off than before the work began, but believes poor planning has sold the community short.
Yeah. It doesn't seem very fair to me. It doesn't seem like it's closing the gap, and it doesn't seem like it's mainstreaming these communities.
Ingerica was contracted to work at Santa Theresa by a building alliance, a consortium of big construction companies delivering the program for the government.
In my view, it didn't work and hasn't worked particularly well for these, what have ended up being fairly minor renovations in remote communities.
But 730 understands one of the alliances working in SIHIP is concerned the $75,000 cap isn't enough to achieve the government's expectations.
The overall policy was to make a healthy home. Well, I think they've gone part of the way, but they haven't gone all the way.
Santa Teresa's residents want to know how much money was spent in each house in their community. Even a parliamentary committee that's monitoring SIHIP is having trouble getting those answers.
Even though when all this started there was supposed to be an open book policy, I haven't found it an open book policy at all. when it comes to the dollars.
I can reassure you $5.2 million was spent in that community bringing 65 houses into a public housing model and bringing them to a safe standard for families.
The Northern Territory Government says SAHIP is on track to deliver 600 new homes by the end of the year, and that overall people are happy.
People are very, very pleased with what has happened. Is it enough? The answer is no. And are we going to go forward and do more? The answer is yes.
The people of Santa Theresa plan to keep tally of the benefits to make sure they get what they were promised.
People are not too sure what happened to the money, so if it's been spent the right way or the wrong way, really hard to say.